Yeah, delays. Yeah, we delayed the show. We're going to be talking about delays in comics. Hey, everybody, welcome to the Elseworlds Exchange. I am Sal, and I am joined today by my special guest, Jason Inman, or Jawiin. You've seen him on DC All Access, and you've also seen him on his own channel, which you can find a link to in the description box below this video. And if you're listening to this episode, you can find it in the description of this episode itself. So, yeah, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you, man. I'm glad I could finally show up on the show. I know we've been talking back and forth about doing some stuff, so I'm glad that we could finally get together and collab.
Completely, yeah. The first time that you and I met was at WonderCon this year.
Yeah,
and
this year.
What an awesome time. That was my second time in LA, but the first time in LA in any professional capacity. Mm-hmm. The first time I was in LA, I was meeting a girl I met online.
Oh.
So that was an interesting story.
That's a different podcast.
Yeah, that's a hell of a story, but a different show. But yeah, we met at WonderCon. You knew me by name, and I was like, oh. And you're like, we should do a show, man. And I'm like, yes, anytime, anywhere, any show. And so we've been shooting the shit back and forth. And you said like, hey, let's do this one. I'm like, let's do it. And I think delays. That was your call. You're like, let's talk about delays.
It was because I emailed you about the Civil War delay that they announced. I think the day of
you're like, this is an interesting topic. Let's chat about delays. And I'm like, yes, because that is something that has plagued comics for a lot longer than people would think. You know, you just assume it's a recent issue, but it's been around for a while. Like it's
been around for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's also interesting to note, and this is a conversation we could definitely have. We could even start it out this way too.
Right.
Okay, so we have trade paperbacks and we have graphic novels and we have collections of arcs, and several of them, what many people don't know, were delayed.
Right.
And I guess the fact of the matter is that once the book is done, once the book is collected, do delays even matter?
Right. Yeah, you mean like when it's being released on a monthly basis, you're champing at the bit to get the next installment, but years down the road, like even when you look at Secret Wars, which was played with delays, it's collected now. Every spin-off has its own trade paperback. Anybody who's interested in getting into Marvel now, and not the name, but like Marvel, now, is interested in getting into it, can just literally pick it up, and there's no issue whatsoever, unless the only issue that I could foresee for any new fan is a disruption in the art.
Yeah, I think that would probably be the biggest thing, is that if the art is completely changed in the middle. But I will say that is a factor that is definitely going to be an interesting conversation a couple years down the road, to see whether that affects the collected Marvel Nows or the collected DC Rebirths, because they are sticking to this double shipping a month, and I've noticed with several of the DC Rebirths that we've already gotten to the secondary artists. Same with Marvel Now. Reading that collected, how will that affect us a couple years down the road?
Yeah, because it's funny, we're used to when you're talking about huge runs of characters or stories, you talk about just these dream team artists and writer combos. You got the Mark Waid and Chris Samnees, you've got the Bendis and Bagleys and so forth. The list goes on, but you have this uninterrupted flow, and whenever you hit a delay, or even when you encounter an annual that's like a chapter break in a story, the art shift can be really jarring.
But I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that there are exceptions, of course, because there are sometimes that works. I think one recent series that did it really well is the New 52 Batman.
Yes.
Because Greg Capullo would draw until he just couldn't draw anymore.
Right.
And then when they would but he would never stop an issue until there was like a break in the storyline.
Yeah.
And then we'd get like a 2-issue arc with some other artist, and then we'd come back to it.
Yeah, that's one of the best examples of a recent Dream Team artist-writer combo where you're just like, these guys are not going to stop. But it's great how seamlessly they worked in Greg's breaks, because I remember like after Court of Owls they did a little like a one shot, and I remember there were a couple of one shots where like they introduced like Harper Row, and then they introduced they did like a Mr. Freeze story, just a one shot in the Batman title where they're like, okay, here's a little story and we can totally do an artist shift and it's not jarring. But then once we do a 6-issue run of some story arc, we got to get back to the main team.
Yeah, and I think that's the interesting thing is I think like that would be the best way to pull it off, because I think if you have like a whip crack editor,
right,
like just plan out the changes, and then I think you can make sure that your main artist, your big guy doesn't miss it. Now, the other interesting thing is I wonder Wonder Woman Rebirth I think is doing something very interesting.
Yes,
that with Nicholas Scott and Liam Sharp is doing the current day storyline, and Nicholas Scott is doing the Wonder Woman Year One.
Right. That's going to be gold. Like,
it's Nicholas Scott. Her art is amazing, and so is Liam Sharp's. And I read the new one that came out today. It'll be interesting too to see for that. Talking about going back to collections, whether they'll split those storylines up, or if they'll publish it as is.
As a cynic, I assume that they would want to make 2 trades out of that, but at the same time, it's the same writer, and you have this kind of, their plan of splitting up the story, of being like, here's a flashback story and here's the present day story. They have to be echoing each other in some regard. There has to be some kind of callback to each other. So, I mean, like, that would be my assumption anyway.
They do a little bit. The one that the new Wonder Woman that came out today, and I think it's 5. And forgive me if I'm wrong. It does echo back to the Wonder Woman Year One that came out, the last previous issue.
Right. Okay.
So there are some echoes of it. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, like, in the collection whether they'll do that.
Yeah.
Another interesting thing, we're talking about delays, is that talking about how people forget about it once it moves on.
Right.
Many people, and certainly not me, because I wasn't reading comics in the 80s because I was a little child, but many people forget that Watchmen was delayed.
Yes. It's funny. I was we were talking about Watchmen not too long ago, and I remember doing some research and it coming up. I didn't remember the delay for Watchmen, but I remember it said, like there were significant delays. Watchmen wasn't especially well received when it was coming out. And they thought it was a little kind of dark, and it had while there were a number of issues contemporarily speaking that were happening at the time, delays were one of them, where they did it was almost echoing how it is today, where they're like, we're doing this event, we're doing this mini-series, it's about this thing, we've got high profile creators working on it, and it's coming out on a monthly basis, and they needed more time. It's funny because I don't know, when you think about sorry, go ahead.
No, nothing. I'm just laughing at it. It's cool.
Well, I was just thinking about how, like, you got some delays. Like, I was thinking about, like, the Daredevil, the Target, where that just never came. Issue 1 comes out, you never see another one in like 12 years. But there are some issues where it's like, okay, there were some delays. I remember Spider-Man, Black Cat, The Evil That Men Do had a huge delay.
It was like 3 years.
Yeah, 3 years, where Kevin Smith was like, well, I have to go make a movie, or 3, and so he would just leave. And I'm like, this is cool, this is a fine story, but the delay was clearly on it didn't really affect it. But with Watchmen, I understand where the delay came from, kind of similarly to the Secret Wars delay, where it's like Asad Rebek's drawing Secret Wars, and he's clearly working. He has a very specific style, and he needs to maintain that same level of quality and integrity. And if you ever read, I'm sure you've read the Alan Moore scripts that he gave to Gibbons about each panel of every Watchman's page, and you're like, no wonder it was delayed. I'm surprised it even came out with the level of intensity and specificity that Alan Moore was like, you need all these other elements. And,
Alan Moore, here, Dave Gibbons.
Yeah, I need all these elements.
Here's my 500-page novel for 1 page of Watchmen.
That's right. It really means a lot if you would just do that. The clock needs to be 3 o'clock. Yeah.
yeah. It's what he just said. The piece of food must be on the left side of the panel, not the right.
Make sure that the specific type of sushi they're eating is actually.
Well, let me ask you. What do you think? What do you think has been, in your opinion, the worst delay in comic book history, or what's the one that just really like jeeved you or chived you?
Oh man,
because I can tell you what mine is off the top.
Yeah, go for it, because I've got a couple where delays that I experienced, and now that I'm so far removed from them, I'm like, yeah, it really didn't matter. At the end of the day, yeah, I got an opinion about that, but yeah,
the one that stands out the most to me, and the reason why it did is because I was buying these single issues, was the Ultimates Volume 2.
Ooh, yeah.
Because there was a year and like 1 month delay between issue 12 and 13.
Yeah.
And I can remember going to my comic book shop like, and at least once a month, Mammoth Comics in Tulsa, Oklahoma, when I was going to college there, by the way, shout out.
Right.
I remember asking him every month, being like, "When is this? Had they said anything to you? Like, when is this going to happen?" And I do think that issue 13 didn't hit as hard for me because of the giant delay. Now, I have the giant hardcover, and that delay means nothing to me anymore, because if you read it all in one pop, it really works. But I remember at the time reading it issued month to month to month, it really hurt issue 13.
Yeah.
What about you?
I think a lot of people in the chat have mentioned it already, but I think I have to say Dark Knight 2, Dark Knight Strikes Again. I remember really looking forward to it. You know, back when I was like, my only exposure to Miller's Batman was Dark Knight Returns and that and Spawn Batman. But like, I saw Spawn Batman as Miller kind of being like, well, I'm playing in someone else's backyard. I'm gonna go off the rails and it doesn't matter. But I expected Dark Knight 2 to be
stupid fun though.
It's
it's stupid fun.
I've always maintained it would be a killer animated movie.
Sure.
Because of how off the wall it is.
Yeah.
The art still rubs me the wrong way because I'm like, oh man, and the coloring for me. I'm like, okay, I see what you're doing. I see what you're trying. You want to play with digital colors. But that delay of I think 3 months was between
yeah, it was 3 months,
and there were only 3 issues, and the issues weren't even that long, and I'm like, what are we doing? And by the time that we were waiting for issue 3, I remember after issue 2, I'm like, I was so checked out. I couldn't even. I was so rubbed the wrong way as far as art and story were concerned. I was like, I mean, I got to know how it ends, but at the same time, I can't even. I can't even bring myself to care. It cemented for me a level of like disinterest where I'm like, it allowed me to really look at it and go, yeah, I'm really not even enjoying it. So you could take forever. I don't care anymore. And then it came out and I immediately bought it. And by the way, I think the time really helped. That's one of those instances where I think,
oh really? Taking
some time, I think that 3 is actually one of the better drawn issues out of the 3 issues they did.
Interesting.
I liked his Batman. I think he made it a little longer too. Like he added a few more pages to it. But that was the one where I went like where I started to notice delays. Where I started to really notice the issue of delays. Obviously, Civil War was a big issue. The first Civil War.
The original Civil War, had that multiple delay.
Yeah,
like between multiple issues.
Yeah, they started out with a delay.
Here's my thing. I think, and this is my thing for delays, is what I would say is that I feel with an ongoing series that a delay is okay as long as the delay is not more than 2 months.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Because you know that you're going to get another issue, you know it's coming, whatever. With events, though, I think events need to hit their release dates because events are all about the momentum and building the momentum. And I will say that Secret Wars last year, having that delay killed some of that momentum for me. And then with any major event now, when you have all the tie-ins, so now you're reading all the tie-ins and you're like, well, wait a minute, where does this take place? Or it mentions something in the issue that you haven't read yet.
Yeah.
And it just gets confusing.
I mean, Secret Wars, I think died on the vine thanks to delays. I mean, that thing
you're probably right.
Because that was a significant, that was something that Marvel almost never has tried before, where they're like, okay, everything is canceled, and we're going to run alternate books for everything. We're going to publish, like, it was almost like a New 52 for them, where they're like, here's 52 new freaking titles. I was
going to say it was an Age of Apocalypse for their entire universe.
Yes, it was. It was very Age of Apocalypse for everybody, where they're like, everything's canceled, but here's a million books in a different universe, and not just in the same different universe, like in Age of Apocalypse, where everything takes place in the same place, and they could at least have a whiteboard where everything makes sense. No, every damn series had its own complete continuity with its own unique universe. But when it came to spoiling previous issues, and when it came to the main book having, when the main book first hit its delay, I went, here, this is not going to go well, because it all culminates into one big reveal that will shape the Marvel universe, and forgive the term, but irreparably, or like you've never seen before. But legitimately, I think they were really leaning towards a change that we were never going to see before. But with the delays that came from the main book, then it had a ripple effect in which there were delays in the tie-ins because then you had to stagger them, and then
there was a delay with was it all new, all different Marvel now then?
Yeah,
because some of those books started releasing before Secret Wars was over.
Yeah, they're dropping books like Invincible Iron Man where the Doctor Doom makes it out of Secret Wars and you're with a new face and you're like, what's happening? Where Marvel's just like, we can't wait anymore. We gotta publish books. And oh man, it's too bad. And my issue is when it comes to delays on a core title, like let's say like a big event like Civil War II, right? Civil War II, written by Bendis. Clearly, Bendis wrote it, like 2-3 years ago, put it in a drawer and forgot about it, or at least as much as Bendis isn't writing it as it's coming out. There are some books where I'm convinced there are some writers who are like, well, I finished like next issue, but I don't know what's happening 2 or 3 issues later. Bendis, I know he knows what's happening, or at least he has like on his legal pad, which characters die. But David Marquez has drawn the book, and I feel like he was drawing Invincible Iron Man and doing such a good job. And Civil War II,
he's a great artist.
So one of the things that I've been touting about Civil War II, say what you will about the book, it looks pretty as hell.
David Marquez rocks, man. Ever since Miles Morales' Ultimate Spider-Man, he's been amazing.
Yeah, when he came on the scene, I was like, wow. Yeah. By the way, can I just say, Ultimate Spider-Man has always had like AAA artists.
Well, it's Bagley, and then who was the second guy?
I want to say it was crap, because it wasn't Pacelli.
No, it was the guy who did Next Wave.
Yes. Oh, Immonen. Stuart Immonen.
Yes, it's Stuart Immonen. He was the second artist, and then it was David Marquez.
Yes, and there was somebody else in between. There was a kind of anime-esque artist, and I know.
Oh yeah. I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah, but any change was like, well, I'm seeing something beautiful and great and different and cool, and it's all good, and it's a level of quality that I've inexplicably come to expect from like the top 3 selling titles from either publishing house. David LaFuente. Thank you, Francisco.
There you go.
But where I'm like, okay, if you're publishing like Batman or Amazing Spider-Man or the Avengers or X-Men, you got to have a AAA title artist on the book. Otherwise, what are you doing? And it's like Ultimate Spider-Man always maintained that level of quality. And but my point being that you had David Marquez on Civil War II, and some of these delays are because things happen. I think that Marquez had a kid, which Mazel tov to David Marquez.
Yeah, which I totally understand.
I totally understand that as well. But I don't know. I feel like, okay, you got an event, you planned it out, it's written, you have this event planned out. If you're going to do an event, if you're going to start, if you're going to continue this trend of like every summer there's going to be an event, a year down the line there's going to be an event. You probably have an idea of what the event's going to be. If you have a writer like Bendis, he's probably already written it, or if he hasn't, he'll write it in over a weekend, it'll be done. And then you give it to the artist and you say, your job for the next 6 months is to draw this event and then put it in a drawer and just wait until like the event's going to come out. I don't know if that's an impossible expectation, but I feel like when
I think it might be, because if your event is 4 issues, I think that's totally doable. If your event is like 6 or 7, I think that might be impossible, because you're asking like the entire editorial staff, all the other titles, to work for you or wait on you for 6 months. I actually think the solution is, have you ever read 52?
Oh yeah.
Okay, that series is one of my favorite series of all time.
It was phenomenal. And did 52 have any delays?
No delays.
Because I feel like it didn't. Delay. And yeah.
Okay, so so that's what I was going to bring up, because on 52, they had 4 different artists. Weekly series for a year. They didn't have a single delay.
Yeah.
4 different artists, 4 different writers. But the thing that kept them on track was that they had Keith Giffen do breakdowns for every single issue. And that basically, if you don't know what a breakdown is, Keith Giffen was like, okay, this panel is going to be a close-up. You're going to have 5 panels. He would basically just draw the panels and do stick figures in there.
Yeah.
So that when the artists got it, they were just like, oh, okay, all I have to do is draw the pictures, because what takes the longest about drawing a comic book is figuring out how you tell the story.
Right.
Like, medium shots, wide shots, close-ups, flip, how many panels. that's what takes so long about it. We made the joke about Dave Gibbons earlier, probably going crazy off of Watchmen scripts.
Yeah, but at the very least, they had a grid format. They knew how many panels they were going to use per page, because writing a comic book is a nightmare experience where you're just like, I don't know how many panels I need to tell this one moment in this story.
Yes, and then the artist has to figure out, like, well, how do I tell this to have the most emotion? How do I tell this to make it look cool?
Yeah.
So I think with all major events going forward, I think if you had an artist that was your breakdown artist and then your regular artist, that would take a lot of the work off of your main artist.
I think you're right. I think that's a fantastic solution, because not only does it take the pressure off to kind of like to stage your shots, break down your pages, but you also have this cohesioncy, or this where you're like, where the book, because 52, sorry, there's so many 52s, I can't keep them all straight, but
there's a lot of them.
But the series 52, even though there were multiple artists, the book still felt cohesive. It's still like the art flowed in the same way from page or from issue to issue, and you're like, okay, I kind of get that. Even though there is an art shift, it's not so jarring because it's not a completely different shift. It's there is some kind of commonality between them all, and it's obviously Gibbons breakdowns.
And you can see in the collected editions too that sometimes the artists like didn't like the angle they chose or whatever, and so like for anybody that would make the argument to be like, well, it wouldn't feel like that artist's book. Well, that artist could redraw and decide to do a different angle any time.
Exactly. It just gives them
time.
It just gives them time. It just gives them the time. It actually gives them the luxury of being like, okay, I see where we're doing with this. And most of the time, if it's talking heads, like I'm not gonna break the mold when it comes to characters in a bedroom talking to each other. But if it's a double page splash, or if it's a nice landscape shot, they could play with that and really infuse their own style in there. I don't think that's too limiting or too cookie cutter or McFactory for them. I mean,
it basically just allows the artist to just draw. That's all they have to do is just draw.
Yeah, they don't have to then break it down and come up with everything else, because it's basically like, okay, I want you to draw an entire movie, but I want you to be the director, the DOP, and the lighting guy. Figure out how, because it's there's so much that goes into it, and it's literally like 3 people who have to show this epic's tale. It's kind of amazing.
Is there I want to ask you another question. Is there a book out there, is there a comic book out there that has never finished that you really want it to?
I've always wanted to see what happened with Image United.
Me too! That's what I was going to say!
But the other one, and I'm sure this is probably another one, is All-Star Batman and Robin the Boy Wonder.
I want to see that one finished too.
I want to know how Miller was going to dovetail it into Dark Knight Returns, because, as you know, it's all part of the Millerverse. Frank's got a whole cohesive world that includes Spawn Batman and Year One and DK2 and DK3, I guess, and there's. But I'd love to see how All-Star Batman and Robin the Boy Wonder worked out, especially because for me, I love Hush. It's one of my favorite Jeff Loeb Bat books. But I think All-Star Batman and Robin might be some of my favorite Jim Lee Bat art.
I will give you that. I like that story a lot. And the reason why I like that story a lot is that I think is because of the art. That book does get kind of a bad rap, I think. And it gets a bad rap that it doesn't deserve. And I would love it, because I remember when they announced it that they were going to finish it and they were going to call it All-Star Batman and Robin: The Dark Knight Returns.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. I agree with you. Some of those pages, like especially like Robin hopping on the train.
That elevated train shot is like one of the best images of Robin.
It's like some of the best stuff Jim Lee's ever drawn.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess that's just because he was just so jazzed to be working with Miller and to be drawing this kind of this universe and to just go all out, because it's very noir. It's very like Sin City, but with Jim Lee's style, which is something you never get to see.
Yeah, it really works. It really works hardcore. I think you nailed it. I think you nailed it. That Jim Lee just had fun. He's like, I'm working on Year One Batman with the guy who created Year One Batman.
Exactly. Those Gordon pages where Gordon's on the docks and he's got the collar up and he's smoking and he like reflection in his glasses and the rain's coming down. You're just like, yeah. Like, this art is phenomenal. But I would love just to see that. I would love to see how that turned out. I mean, the staging of everything really worked out. I mean, it's interesting because you've probably also read Miller's scripting for it, where he's like, "Okay, Jim, we're just gonna make him drool over Vicky Vale here in this shot. Go for it."
I have that director's cut issue of All-Star Batman and Robin 1. Yeah, when he's just like, his description of Jim Lee is like, make everyone in the comic book world drool over Vicky Vale.
Yeah. I remember picking that up for the first time and just being like, what are we, wow. Like, I've seen Jim Lee drawing since his X-Men days, and I'm like, I've never seen him draw women like this in my life. It was unbelievable. God, yeah. The other image for Jim Lee for me, just linking it with Batman and Frank Miller, is that alternate variant for Dark Knight 3: The Master Race image of Batman and Carrie Kelly Robin.
Oh yeah. I have that. I actually framed that. I put it up on my wall.
That's all. That was my. This is the difference. Like, you have it on your wall. This was my cell phone background for a while.
Oh, nice.
It's just the sketch cover, and then it was colored, and I'm like, oh, this is amazing.
Just to show you how much of a nerd I am, and this will give away. This will time date this video forever. This is my lock screen. That's. Oh wait, it went to black. All right, there we go. Sorry.
Oh, nice. Blue Superman.
I love some Electric Superman. Sorry for showing you the black. That was a tease.
That was all right.
Just the reflection.
Yeah. God, blue Superman. I'm amazed that Grant Morrison put up with that for as long as he did when he was doing Justice League, where he's like, yeah, no, let's go for it. I'll run with it.
Dude, I have some love for Electric Superman, and he's another one that he gets a bad rap, and that's why I loved, and this will be spoilers for last week's Superwoman.
Okay, yeah.
I loved that Lana Lang is the new Superwoman, and she has red Electric Superman powers.
You know, I didn't want to. I got more of a binary from Marvel image for her, but now that you mention it, that really is just that's Electric Red Superman.
Yeah. All you got to do is look at her shield is the Electric.
Is the Electric S?
Yeah.
Wow. That. I can't believe I didn't notice that.
Now, I'm not going to spoil the other thing that happens in that book.
No,
yeah. But when I opened up that book and I read that, I was like, oh my God, you guys figured out a way to bring back Electric Superman, and by making it Lana Lang, it makes it cool. It
makes it cool and not disruptive. It doesn't, like, all of a sudden we got to have Superman be blue and electric again. Like, I liked, they did it, they did a cool reach back for Electric Blue Superman when, this is a long time ago, I think, when they brought Livewire in and she was trying to reform and she needed a containment suit, so Superman goes to the Fortress of Solitude.
I remember that.
Yeah, and he gives her that, and she, like, alters the S to become an L. I was like, that's really cool. He's like, wait a minute, you needed a containment suit for electricity powers? I think I have something in the Fortress for that. Like, that's really cool.
I want to point out, somebody in the chat just said, Fat Snorlax says, why do I get the feeling that Jason is a DC apologist? LOL.
Oh.
I'm not. I just speak up for what I like. That's what it is. It doesn't matter whether it's Marvel, Image, or anything. I speak up for what I like, and I don't care how stupid it is.
No, that's respectful, man. Like, it's easy to make fun of the silly eras of comics, and it's harder to back it up or to come to its defense. Here on this channel, we will often point out the flaws, but at every turn, if there's an opportunity, especially if I liked it or if I still think there's some value, you gotta speak up for it, because.
Well, what do you like? Yeah, because I have a lot of love for Electric Superman. I love the Age of Apocalypse. I'm trying to think of like a stupid Marvel thing. I love '90s Wildcats. Like,
yes.
Crazy love them.
I prefer '90s Wildcats. I prefer I prefer that era of Wildcats, because I'm like, man, when is DC going to pull them back and make a team out of that?
Dude, I have, I won't tell you what it is, but because it doesn't matter. But every time I get the chance to see Jim Lee, I'm literally like, hey, man, here's my Wildcats pitch.
Now, let me ask you a question, just because when else am I going to get the opportunity? Does he ever? I don't want to ask like anything, spoiling or groundbreaking, but does he ever kind of wish that he could draw Wildcats again? Does he ever go, I do miss Maul and Grifter and the team?
I don't know, because he's never brought it up. But I will say that his assistant Eddie Choi, who's a really, really cool dude, he has a cubicle right outside Jim Lee's office, and on the top of his cubicle are statues, like 12-inch high statues of all the Wildcats.
Wow.
Yeah.
I
So
didn't even know those.
there's a lot of Wildstorm love around the DC office, and like I love Wildstorm, and so that's why like every time I see it, I'm just like, oh hey, cool, I love those too.
Yeah, I was a big Team 7 fan.
I like Team 7 too. Yeah.
I thought they were really cool. I was like, this is a cool like kind of mix of Sergeant Rock and 90s comics.
Did you know they're finally reprinting Gen 13?
Really? Like the Brandon
like
Choi?
I think it was in the November solicitations or the December solicitations.
No shit, I did not see that because that was the other thing I was going to say was I read a lot of Gen 13 back in the day.
Yeah, like you know, comic books like originally were for kids.
Yeah,
and if you think about comic books, like the idea that these people put on these tights and run around is kind of silly and stupid.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
yeah,
so that's
it's objectively stupid. Like,
yeah,
if you took it upon yourself to go out and help people, you wouldn't then like put on a leotard to do it first. You would just go do good. You don't need to put on some kind of ridiculous flashy outfit to do good. You could just donate money or volunteer or whatever.
Yeah, so it's like the crazy stupid stuff. Sometimes a lot of it is fun, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like when I was in high school, I read a lot of Spawn.
Oh, yes. Oh, we didn't even get a chance to talk about Spawn. I read all the way up to issue 100, and then I went, okay, this ride is over.
That's where I checked out, too.
Because it was a perfect jumping off point, because...
Yep.
So I'll get back... don't let me derail you too much, because I want to get back to that point. But that was a perfect jumping off point, because it was clearly like, we could end Spawn here, but we won't.
By the way, Spawn, a book with a lot of delays.
Yes! You know, well, Image, a company with a lot of delays.
Oh, man, Image.
But
Spawn, like, I loved it in high school. And I had the action figures. I buy all the action figures that they made and stuff like that. And I went to see the Spawn movie.
Oh, yeah.
But, like, I'm the first to admit, I tried to reread Spawn a couple years ago. It does not hold up.
It does not. We did a 2-part back issues on Spawn when we first started this channel, and we still get people because it's Spawn. It's tagged as Spawn. People still will come find the episodes where I'm like, okay, guys, I read a lot of Spawn. In high school, I drew a lot of pictures of Spawn and capes and chains. It's so great. So here's an apology here. I have my Spawn Batman poster up that I nabbed from a Wizard Comics recently.
Hey, that's good.
But like. Okay, I love Spawn, the Image, and when I was reading it, I thought it was so deep and so awesome. I'm like, I love the cartoon, which I thought was...
The cartoon, I think, is probably the best version of Spawn.
It is. It's a great... It's like, for me, it's like Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes, where it's a distillation of everything that's good into a pure product. Similarly, the Max cartoon was like, hey, here's everything that's from that universe, but we'll distill it into a short form, like beautiful, pure, cool looking product, and it will just represent everything that you like about this product. But that Spawn cartoon show rocked. But yeah, we when we talk about it, I'm like, okay, guys, I grew up with Spawn. I read a lot of Spawn. I have a lot of issues of Spawn. I went back and reread it. I thought it was very deep. It's really superficial and kind of dumb. And people get real mad at me. To the point where people still get mad at me. They'll find the episode. They'll go, oh, this guy's going to talk about how awesome Spawn is. And then they watch it, and then they just freak out. And I get like,
you should do it.
Yeah, they're like, what are you talking about? Spawn's the greatest. Did you know that he gave up his soul to be with his wife? I'm like, yes, I get the premise. It's just kind of dumb. And the pseudo religion that's involved, where it doesn't quite go there, but it claims to because it has highfalutin hellish art, and it's silly, it's fun. I get it, and it's a perfect. If you're a 13-year-old boy, Spawn will hold up 100%. I think. Yeah,
I think because that's who it's made for.
Exactly, it's made for people who think that Spider-Man in a big cape is awesome.
It's also the reason why, it's the same reason why, and I found this across the board, and there are some diehard X-Men fans.
Yes.
But most people grow out of the X-Men because it's the perfect teenager comic book.
Oh, yeah, because no one will ever understand me. And
no one will understand me, and I'm special, and I'm different, and what can we do? And,
we have to be proactive without actually ever affecting change or being proactive.
Yeah, because the X-Men can never make humanity love them, because if they do, the comic book is over.
Exactly. It's the same thing for Daredevil. Like, Daredevil has to be miserable. Do you want to read 6 issues of him eating a sandwich and going to church and having a nice time? Like, no. You want to see this guy get kicked in the face all the time. X-Men can never succeed. Like, do they work as and their story arcs? They only got worse as they go. Like they're big events. Because like I think Age of Apocalypse is kind of like the last X event. Because after that, where do you go? You know, like because it's not the last X event by any stretch of the imagination.
I was trying to think about like where do you go? Like if there has been a better X-Men event.
Because you got God Love Man Kills in the '80s where it's just like okay, we hit it directly on the nose what the X-Men represent as far as politically speaking and socially and social responsibility. Like this is a metaphor for religion according to Chris Claremont in this one thing, and then you just go forward with that, and then you go okay, well I guess we'll do cosmic stuff with Phoenix, and we can step away from the political and explore who these people are. But at the core, it's still these people who are like, I'm damaged and no one will ever understand me, and I'm unique and special. And that's why whenever you see the X-Men, everyone's favorite iteration of X-Men, I am very, very challenged to find the people's favorite version of a character or costume is when they were all unified. When they all had the same costumes. No, everybody liked X-Men when it was like a team of people who could all have their own solo book because they all had very, very distinctly unique costumes.
Yep.
Gambit never wore like an X uniform. I mean, he did. He had like a yellow one at one point, but he still had that coat. But he everybody you could literally spin like Jim Lee's X-Men. You could spin any one of those characters in their own book because they looked and acted so different and unique from each other. But yeah, you were saying X-Men is a perfect book where it's like, yeah, 13. I'm a 13-year-old boy or girl. This is a comic book for me. But when you turn
and if you still love X-Men into your adulthood, there's nothing wrong with it.
No, absolutely. Look, even in Spawn, you can find elements to enjoy. And the fact is, as you were saying, like, look, Electric Superman, you got affinity for that character. You find your joy where you can, and if it's a truly timeless book, like there's going to be stuff in there that you can mine for your own joy in any generation that you're in. So yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I think that was a good little wrap around on the X-Men.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
We're talking about delays.
Yes.
I wanted to bring up one that I think is one of my favorite comic book series of all time.
Okay.
That had a humongous delay in it, but when the last issue came, I loved it.
Right, it was still worth it.
Planetary.
Ooh, Planetary, good call.
Because Planetary 26 and 27 had a 3-year delay.
Yeah.
But the 27 was oversized.
Right.
I think it was like 40 pages. And even though it had been 3 years since that finale, because I think John Cassaday was doing... Astonishing X-Men at the time, and that's the reason why it was delayed.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry.
Because he got the Marvel paycheck, and he was like, this is much more than that Wildstorm paycheck. But that final issue hit, and I read that issue, and I felt it just as strongly.
Wow.
As I had, and that's still one of my favorite series of all time.
Now, here's a question. Now, have you reread it since then, collected, and had have you read it all beginning, cover to cover? Would you say what would you compare the experience to having experienced the delay and then finished it and then read it all together? Like, did the artificial delay make it in some way more impactful? Because when I first read Preacher, for example, a friend of mine gave me the first volume when I was a sophomore in college. He was like, here you go, here's volume 1. There's 9 volumes. For 4 years, I collected those volumes of Preacher. I never finished Preacher until I think a week after I graduated from college. I went into the apartment and I read volume 9. It took 4 years to read Preacher, and I'm so glad I did take that time, that I didn't just sit there and read them all in one sitting or over a weekend. And I'm glad I had that time. Would you say that was a similar experience, or are you glad that you finally have it all collected?
It's weird. I'm glad that we have it all together because it really reads very strongly. Planetary is one of these books that it takes about 9 issues until you get it. And so for that, I think you have to read it collected.
Right.
But I will say that the delay, when I was reading it in the single issues, the delay, did kind of make that last final issue mean more.
Yeah.
And then also reading it since collected, the last issue kind of seems as this weird epilogue that's kind of separate from the rest.
Okay.
But it makes it stronger because it is.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I don't know. It's weird. It's hard to describe. Like Planetary is a hard book to describe.
Yeah. No, it's
Besides
true.
Read it.
But read it. Yeah, but pick it up. That's the thing, is that sometimes the delay will result in unexpected things. Secret Wars, you got an extra book out of it.
Yeah.
And that book was double-sized.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'm sure that if you missed all of that entire series and now go pick up Secret Wars, it probably reads awesome.
I did. I reread it collected. Secret Wars together reads a lot better collected.
Yeah.
Like all of Jonathan Hickman's work.
Yeah, well, if you're going to read Hickman, I guess you have to start with his run on Fantastic Four, then just go all the way, and you got to read Infinity, and you got to read.
Yeah, you have to go all. Yeah. See, that's the weird thing about Secret Wars, and this is no spoilers, is that you don't realize till the end that it's essentially his epilogue to his Fantastic Four run.
Exactly. Now that I kind of saw that coming from like when Reed loses his family in the ship, I'm like, Secret Wars is a Fantastic Four book about Reed and Doom, isn't it?
Oh, see, I didn't see it coming to the last issue. So that's funny.
I was like, there's no way when T'Challa goes to the island of Agamotto and gets the other Infinity Gauntlet. I go, this is all cool, but it's not going to end with a fist fight with Doom and T'Challa. It's going to end with Reed, and in fact it did. And it ended with Molecule Man, who was kind of tied in intrinsically with Doom because of the original Secret Wars book from '84. And
yeah, sure.
I mean, I'm like, yeah, Secret Wars, Owen Reese, Secret Wars.
The whole, I will tell you this, that was the thing that always knocked me out of that story. Was I was always the whole Molecule Man thing. I was kind of like, what are you doing?
For me, I liked the idea, but it was clear that Hickman was kind of like taking his ideas and running with them. Like, Molecule Man should be infinitely powerful because he can control molecules, but at the same time, the idea that if you collect all the Molecule Men, you can have the power of gods, and then you have to slay the Beyonders, and then there's then you have to have Hickman make up the whole. There are Beyonders beyond the other Beyonder, despite 3 retcons for Beyonder. But yeah.
Omar brought up this point in the chat. He said, was Final Crisis delayed? I don't remember. I think it was.
I think it had to have been, but I think that the Superman 3D story probably filled in the gap during that period.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think it's yes, because they did take a break in between the middle of this series, and that's exactly what they did. They put that Superman Beyond in the middle.
Yeah. And by the way, supplemental, and I'm sure that what's his name? Grant Morrison had every intention of using it anyway, but
yeah, you can't read that story without reading the Superman Beyond, no matter what.
No, exactly. You need it because it explains where Superman went.
Yeah,
but Final Crisis. Good question about that one. But what's interesting is, okay, so we're talking about modern delays. I don't remember, and I tried to look it up because Secret Wars, the original one from '84,
was that delayed?
12 issues. I don't think there were any delays.
Okay.
But it came out. There had to have been delays, but I feel like I don't remember anybody complaining about it. But then again, it's like 32 years old.
It was all about the toys, Sal.
It was all about the toy. That was a toy commercial in a big bad way. But you know what? Like Spawn, I love that. I love that series. That's pure unabashed comics for me. It's like, let's take all the action figures and put them in your bathtub and have them fight each other. That is exactly what Secret Wars is, and I don't even think it made any pretenses about what it was. And you even got some cool stuff out of it. You got the Ben Grimm change, you got the symbiote, you got you got the X-Men being single-handedly defeated by Spider-Man. There's a lot of fan service in that. In that
see, the weird thing about that Secret Wars is I recently reread it for our podcast Geek History Lesson, and Magneto and the Wasp flirting is very weird.
It's very weird.
Doesn't make sense.
It's very weird. She's just so drawn to his animal magnetism. I don't know.
Oh, it's the red. It's the red and the purple. Yeah. He looks classy.
For me, the takeaway for that book is that Colossus makes time with an alien lady.
He does.
And so much so, we talk about this in our episode of Back Issues where we just made fun of it because, at the end of the episode, just one of my co-hosts just goes the real secret to Secret Wars is that Colossus slept with an alien chick and cheated on Kitty Pryde. And I'm like, yeah, but Kitty Pryde was also underage during that time, so they're probably trying to argue to get him to try to distance himself. Once they established how old she was and how old he was, they were like, we got to end this relationship fast. How are we going to do that? Alien girl.
Well, the other weird thing about that too is that doesn't Iceman get jealous? Well?
Does he get? No, Iceman isn't there. I think it's Human Torch because Human Torch.
Oh, my bad. Yeah, that's Human. Yeah, they're interchangeable to me.
No, well, you know what it is. This is not what it is, but you know what it is. They made an action figure Iceman for the Secret Wars action figure line, but not a Human Torch. But Human Torch appeared in the comic.
That's right, because that's back at the time where they thought that kids, if they saw the Human Torch, would just light themselves on fire.
When they made the original Fantastic Four cartoon in the '60s, they replaced him with a robot named Herbie.
And although I love Herbie,
they kept Herbie around though. They kept that idea of like, no, a sentient robot with a 4 on his like floating tummy is a really good idea. Let's keep Herbie around.
It's just as cool as a guy who lights on fire.
Yeah, kids are gonna love it. Trust me. It's funny. That's a carryover from from parents being afraid the kids were gonna put on a towel around their neck and jump out the window thinking they could fly like Superman.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
I'm like, no, that's like any ridiculous parent, like helicopter parent concern. Like, no kid's gonna. If a kid manages to light himself head to toe on fire because he tries to be Human Torch, that is no.
There's something wrong with the parenting right there.
Yeah,
that's what that is.
Stan would be like, that's a hell of a publicity stunt. Thank you. But yeah, so what's another delay thing that I wanted to bring up? Do you feel that there is kind of a promise not to delay, or that there's an expectation that they will delay at this point, where it's like, whenever they announce a big event, I always anticipate some significant delay.
Yeah.
Is that cynical, or is that just like seasoned? Is that just like, I think you would have to be naive to assume that there won't be a delay, even though they'll announce it like way in advance and have they seemingly have their ducks in a row. No.
I will think, again, it goes back to that thing where I think it's the events. I think there's no way you can have an event now without a delay. But I think there is a promise of the regular series coming out on time.
Right.
Now, the downside about that is that the thing will happen, like we talked about very earlier in the show, about like how because it's become an assembly line, there will be random artists thrown into the book.
Yes, that's true.
And that's to the detriment of the book, I think.
I think you're right, because there is a momentum, even with a monthly series, where you have an expectation, even if it's not a written promise.
Yeah.
Where you're going to have consistency in your book. And if that consistency is broken, it should be for at least a narrative reason. Because while we're dealing with businesses dealing with multi-billion-dollar properties now, they're storytellers, and their obligation, while it is to their bottom line, it's also to telling a cogent and enjoyable story. And part of that, in this medium, just like any medium, delivering on every facet of their execution, is like a consistent writer and a consistent artist making at least a complete story. I remember being really surprised during Superior Spider-Man when Ryan Stegman left the book suddenly, and I'm like, what? Yeah. What the hell happened?
It's interesting because comic books is a publishing medium.
Yeah.
That it's so weird because when you look at a TV show, if The Flash was to suddenly be like on the Thursday before the Tuesday night episode, if The Flash was suddenly to be like, oh, we're not airing that episode because we haven't finished it,
that would be inexcusable.
It would be basically inexcusable. So it's kind of, to me, the same way. And if you notice, TV shows plan their schedules accordingly. Like, we always get we start in October and we go to November, and then there's like a month break.
Yeah.
And then we come back for like 6 more weeks.
Right.
And then there's another month break, and then we go all the way to the end. And to me, I think it would be smarter for all the publishers to just plan their breaks accordingly. Yeah. Like if you know that by issue 5 your artist is going to be just tired.
Right.
And barely on schedule, well, then give him 2 issues give him 2 issues off, and let's go to the other artists. And that is the advantage. I will say that I think that some of the Marvel titles have done this, and DC Rebirth has done this too. By like when they announced the book, they were like, "Oh, it's these 2 artists."
Mm-hmm. Well, that's also allowed books like Superman and Action Comics to come out on time, like, to be and consistent, and damn if it doesn't disrupt the flow of the story. Superman, is out. It feels like it's a weekly book.
Yeah, with Action Comics, it really does.
For how consistent it is, and how consistently good it looks. And what's funny?
I don't know. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, just like apropos your comment about giving the artist a break by doing, by having another artist come in for like a 2-issue run. It also kind of gives your writer a break because it allows them to put on the brakes and maybe tell a less epic or a more intimate or just a more off the beaten path story. It lets them stretch themselves a little better, or it lets them catch their breath before
even think about like All-Star Batman.
Yeah.
Where every arc we're going to get a different artist. And is that not as good? Well, yeah, I don't know, but like we're getting each story with the original artist, so I don't think that's that bad.
Right.
And I also think like I'm trying to think of an ongoing comic book that has done that. One that doesn't come to my mind. I almost wanted to say New X-Men, but I know that they replaced Frank Quitely because he was too slow, and that's why Ethan Van Sciver got on the book, and then Ethan Sciver got fired, and then I can't remember that. Igor is the other guy that I can't remember his name. He popped in.
Yep, I remember that name, but I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't know. Can you think? Has there been an ongoing book that replaced the artist every arc? There's got to be, right?
Okay. What's an interesting example? It's not the best example because of how unique it is. Do you remember? This is another Spider example, but do you remember when they did Brand New Day for Spider-Man?
Yes.
And they were like, they canceled all the other books, and they said Spider-Man's coming out 3 times a month, and we're gonna have 3 different artists and 3 different writers, and they're going to all work together, and it's going to come out. And there were no major delays as far as I recall, but they had.
I don't think there were. Yeah,
they had an arc, and they did it, and then the next group came out, and they did an arc, and then that came out, and it was basically like a trade paperback assembly line where they're like, "Here's an arc, boom, out," and it was one writer, one artist, boom, done, next, and they would just rotate. Like you would have like 3 sets, and then they would just reset, and it was like a typewriter, just go from here, start over.
And with the exception of retelling the Devil storyline again, or giving another explanation to the Devil storyline, I think Brand New Day was mostly successful.
Oh yeah, I didn't like the direction it went, but I thought that the execution was admirable. I thought that the attempt was successful. I think that it did exactly what they wanted to do. They wanted to bring in new readers. They wanted to inject new lifeblood into the series. They created some new characters that they still use today. That driver guy didn't make it, Overdrive, but Mr. Negative certainly.
I would say it's set the foundation for what I think is one of the greatest Spider-Man runs of all time, Dan Slott.
Dan Slott, yes. One of the greatest, I'd say, yeah, he's in the top 10, 5 maybe?
I think he's in the top 5.
Yeah, definitely top 5. Okay, if you were, yeah, I'd say that.
Because name me the other 4. Like, let's objectively do this, okay? Like,
well, I would use
Stanley
and Ramita. I'd say, what's it called? Bagley and Bendis.
I think you have to give Roger Stern.
Yes, Roger Stern was the next one I was going to go with. And I guess DeMatteis. He was...
Because I don't. My other choice would be Straczynski, but since
I loved Straczynski's run for a good long time.
But the problem is that the end of his run almost imploded.
Yes.
And so I don't know if he makes it onto the list because of that.
You know what's funny? I drop whenever anybody asks me what to recommend, I always go with Straczynski's first volume, and then you go with volume 1. You go up to Happy Birthday. You skip Skin Deep. You go through New Avengers, and then you drop it after New Avengers. Like you just have
as soon as they hit Civil War, just drop it.
As soon as you get Civil War, you can drop it. If you want to, you get some interesting insight into Civil War. But if you don't care about that, just drop it right after New Avengers. Because it's funny because with that whole run, there's dips and dives. Like the other, I think was a misstep. But,
the other was a pretty big misstep.
Yeah, but all his stuff with Romita Jr. is gold.
Yes. The beginning of his you're right. The first volume of that, I have that in trade, is like just awesome.
Right? Oh, Fighter just reminded me of Jerry Conway's run, which was also
that's a good choice.
Iconic.
That's a good choice.
So yeah, I mean, I think there's, it's funny. I think it's more like there have been some great writers who had some great runs, but I definitely call Dan Slott in the top 5 because the dude, his brand new, his big time for me is fantastic. Spider Island is unparalleled.
Yeah.
The rest of them I'm like, but when he first came on, like New Ways to Die, I was not a huge fan of, but I saw the greatness in him. I was like, ooh, I think I see where he's going with this.
John DeLorenzo asked in the chat, he said, speaking of delays, what about the DC Earth 1 series, which is an interesting question. Now, these are different. These are singular graphic novels.
Yes. Now, are they delayed? Like, are they delayed or did it just... Yeah, I don't think so. Because I don't think
so either.
No, because they're self-contained. They're graphic novels. Yeah. That's like... It's like saying, that like the next Tom Clancy novel is delayed. Like, no, it takes however long it takes him to write them. Like,
or Game of Thrones.
Or Game of Thrones, exactly. Although that's part of an ongoing saga. It's like there is an expectation, but there's also, because of the delays. I mean, everyone expects that to be delayed.
Well, I don't think, for me, like the idea of delays is that like for years Wonder Woman Earth 1 was talked about. Years and years and years and years. And then Jeff Johns was going to do a Batgirl Earth 1, I remember. Mm-hmm. That was going to happen for a while, and that seems to have disappeared.
Yeah, that's too bad.
For books that have never started...
Yeah, that's not a delay. That was more like they may have gotten ahead of themselves as far as, like, if internet comic book reporting didn't exist, we'd never even know they didn't have it.
Exactly. And for me, that's a non-issue.
Yeah, because who knows? Like, there's so many, you find some older creators are coming out now that internet comic book reporting has become the norm. You got people coming out from the past being like, here's some things that almost happened. You'd hear inklings about it. I remember when Wizard would run an issue about, or an article about, like, George Perez being like, I have some old pages from that rejected JLA Avengers crossover I was working on. Like, was that delayed? No, it was a book that they were thinking about doing. Perez got excited and drew a few pages, and then they decided not to do.
Think about this. You're talking about, like, the ultimate of those delays. For me, the J. Scott Campbell, Jeff Loeb Spider-Man run that never happened.
I remember, I remember being so jazzed for that announcement.
Me too, man.
I was like, oh, Jeff Loeb's going to write Spider-Man. That sounds awesome. And J. Scott Campbell doing all those. And I thought that remember when J. Scott Campbell drew every issue of JMS's run for a while? Like, he did all those covers.
Every cover. It was like every cover, yeah.
I was like, okay, this is like a prelude to his, like, alternate run on the next series. It never came out. But is that delayed? No, it's just that they just decide not to do that book. They got canceled. Like, is the new Blade book starring the female Blade delayed? Like, no, that was a concept. They got up to, like, maybe a teaser, and that's the end of it. Like, now Earth 1, man. By the way, just quality overall. Like,
I've liked every one so far.
I wish they would do that more. I've always been a big advocate of the graphic novel.
Mm-hmm.
And DC's doing it right. I remember Marvel played with it with those season 1 books, and I was like, "This is a cool idea." But it didn't quite catch on.
Marvel hasn't nailed it yet in that format.
That Rage of Ultron book was really good, and they were like, maybe it's in continuity, maybe it isn't. Oh, yeah, it is. Okay, well, it's Marvel.
Yeah, that was the thing. Like, that's where you come with problems on that, where you're like, when you can't decide whether it's in continuity or you can't decide on a common theme. The advantage that DC has with that is that they're like, okay, these are all set on this other Earth.
Yeah,
done.
Oh, apropos, you're talking about J. Scott Campbell and Batman and Gen 13 and whatnot, bringing it all together. And
Danger Girl?
No, well, Danger Girl. I don't know. I think that book was played with delays as well.
So was Battle Chasers, man.
Yeah, but did you remember hearing a rumor about the Batman Gen 13 crossover?
No,
because I remember hearing about it. Like, Campbell said, I think, like, after he stopped drawing Gen 13, he was like, I'm leaving Gen 13 to do the Batman crossover. And then they released this cover image of Batman on a gargoyle with the Gen 13 cast behind him and drawn by Campbell. And I'm like, this is going to be ridiculous. And then it never came out. And it was like, how far did they get? Was it canceled? Will they ever come out with it again? No. Even though actually they own those characters now. They could do it anytime they want to.
They could. That's crazy. I've never heard of that.
Google it. It's a cool image. It's a relic. You're like, oh, that's kind of fun.
Oh, look at it right now.
Yeah, but yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a topic that, while we've gone in different directions, we've gone all over the place, we've gone all over the map. We've kind of hammered down, like, there are gonna be delays in event books. There are some ways to combat it, but at the same time, I think that the fact is they're inevitable, and if you're willing to be patient, they become irrelevant. I mean, yes. I don't think there's any book that is finished that encountered a delay that was really significantly harmed by the delay, unless you lost the artist and it had a complete tonal shift. But off the top of my head, I can't really think of anything.
Yeah, I can't either. And you go right back to Watchmen.
Yeah,
nothing. Watchmen was delayed, and nobody cares.
Exactly. Yeah, Watchmen is delayed, and that's a footnote in its history. That's like that's an IMDb trivia fact, as opposed to anything that affects it. You read that book together and you're like, yeah, right, he must have finished this all in one sitting. Like, it's all cohesive to the point where it's completely irrelevant. The delay.
And a couple years from now, no one will remember that Secret War is delayed, and we barely remember that the original Civil War was delayed.
That's right, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh no, Civil War is touted. I mean, it's so successful. It's a $1 billion movie franchise, and that book had significant delays, and I remember those delays. Like,
I do too. I remember being pissed.
Exactly. I remember being like outraged by these delays. I'm like, how could they do this? It's only 7 issues. How could they take this long? And it was, now who cares? As long as they publish it and they have quality as their main priority, I don't care really. I mean, like, I think that's really what it is. Just have an understanding about where things are. I remember hearing a lot of outrage when Civil War II was delayed until they heard that Marquez had a baby. And then they were like, oh, okay, never mind. Well, that's understandable. Fair enough. No, give him some time. Give the man some time. He's a father, for God's sake.
I actually think that Marvel should have leaned hardcore into it and had, like, Brian Michael Bendis, because he's an artist.
Yeah.
Draw an image of, like, Captain Marvel and Iron Man, like, holding a spider baby and be like, we just got a bundle of joy who, like, ruined the desk that we're drawing the book on.
Yeah, exactly. At least like, because that's a beautiful thing. It's not it to be celebrated. It's not like I was gonna say Assad Ribic. David Marquez lost someone in his family, and so it's like, well, we're being quiet about it. It's sad. It's something to be celebrated. Own it.
It's totally nice because you're just like, oh, that is a major life event.
Yep.
I totally understand. It's not just because you're slow and lazy and watching, like, reruns of Criminal Minds instead of drawing.
Right. He went, oh, crap, where was I? Oh, yeah. How many issues are we on? I saw a Spider Batman 97 was like, Ben is a penciler? Yeah, I think he drew... Did he draw Jinx?
He drew he drew, like, his first, like, 3 or 4 books.
Yeah, because that's... If you ever want to get into publishing your own comics, it's easier if you're a writer-artist, because you can sell yourself 2 ways. And Bendis was a stronger writer than he was a penciler, according to Joe Quesada, which is why he, got the Alias job. I've read them. They're not, the art is not great. The story is good. Exactly. But it's funny, but I don't think it's amateur. When I see Bendis's pencils, I don't go like, you look at it from the scope of it came out in 2000, and you're like, okay, yeah, this is fine. This looks like an indie book. It doesn't feel like
very indie.
Yeah, exactly. He's almost hiding his imperfect. It's like shooting a monster movie, and you have a low budget, and you gotta play with lighting in order to hide your imperfections. Bendis does that it's noir, so I'm gonna hide all of my missteps with shadow and black and white.
Got it.
But so anyway, that's our topic for today. We're just we don't necessarily answer the question, although I think we got as close as one can get to solving the delays dilemma.
Were we supposed to solve it?
No. No, but I find that whenever you raise a question on the internet, someone always says, like, yeah, but, like, what's the answer? And it's like,
sometimes there isn't.
Most of the time, it's all about the journey, man. You gotta ask the questions first, and when you do that, you go down the rabbit hole and find even more questions. So for us here on Elseworlds Exchange, I want to thank my special guest, Jason Inman. Thank you so much for being on the show, man.
Thank you for having me, dude.
Hopefully next time, you're Jordan. You're welcome to join us anytime you want, man.
Oh, I'm going to take you up on that.
Okay, well, you heard it here first. And we'll see you guys next time on Comic Pop. Thanks a lot for watching. And hey, Jason, anything happening on your channel that you want to promote, plug, or mention before we go?
Every week on Wednesdays, I try to give you books that you should read if you like about a certain character. This week I did Blue Beetle because of Blue Beetle Rebirth. So over at youtube.com/Jawiin, Jawiin. Every Wednesday, I'm going to try to pick 4 comics that you should read. And then you can always find me on DC All Access as well.
Of course, yeah. And congratulations, by the way, of hitting that milestone over there as well.
I know. We got a big old live stream coming up on September 2nd.
September 2nd. You'll have to check that out. And we'll see you guys next time over here on ComicPOP, by the way. Around 8 o'clock tonight, Eastern Time, we're going to drop the episode of of back issues, we're doing New Fantastic Four from 1990, I think.
Oh my God!
Yeah,
have fun with that.
It's the most commercialist Fantastic Four ever. Everyone was like, "You're doing Fantastic Four? Was it Hickman's run? No. Is it Wade's run? Nope. It's Walt Simonson's three issue run. Enjoy." But thanks a lot for watching. We'll see you guys next time. So long.